right. Hello, hello. So, this is a continuation of the professional identity lecture at Friends University. So, our first 3 hours of teaching on the slides and on the topic between both the morning and evening class, uh, they ended within one slide of each other. So, that's pretty impressive. So, I'm going to start the one slide back. So for those of you who were in the class that made it a little bit further, uh, you're only going to get a repeat of like a minute or two. So that's pretty incredible to me. So that makes this easy. So I'm going to continue off on the PowerPoints where I ended in class. So you're obviously watching this later as opposed to in person. But what I want to encourage is obviously that's going to include no question answer time. However, this is going to be on YouTube, so you can comment questions, you can text or email me questions, and I will keep the conversation going there. So, not the same as the live feedback experience, but the availability for questions that come up is still there, and I might even take time as I go through the slides and the talking to pause to give room to think. Now, I may do that, or I might just say if you need room to think, pause your video. There's probably going to be a couple of those moments now in this setting. So I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint, and we will go ahead and continue on from there. So jumping back in. All right. So I'll move back just a little bit as a reminder. What we were talking about is the 4-layered niche approach to specialization. So where we left off in the one class was on this slide. We actually touched on everything. And I'm going to leave this up for a second. We talked about the importance of having a really 8-year-old reading level, understanding level. I used this example of the specialization I had post-grad, a specialization that is still mine that I just don't use as much, with different levels of communication to people as the conversation is invited to deeper and deeper levels. So there's that. You can pause if you want to look at it longer. These slides will be available to all of you as well. Okay. So this slide, I think also the further class addressed this. So this will be a little bit repetitive for a minute, but niche and target audience as we look at marketing a therapy practice. So again, circling back to the question mark of being a generalist or being a specialist, the ever back and forth debate and question. Again, the focus here is when you are focused, you speak directly to a specific audience, right? It tells people this is for you. You think of movie trailers. If it's obvious in the first couple seconds it's a horror movie, you can decide you want to watch the rest of the trailer or just skip it because you don't watch horror movies, versus a movie trailer that is kind of tonally confusing. And you might not be able to think of immediate examples, but there are films and media content that come out and they're kind of all over the place. The marketing team is not very communicative of what we're supposed to be understanding about what this movie is going to be like. And so that's the idea, right? You don't necessarily want to make a movie for everyone, but you want to cast as wide of a net as possible within the focused market that you have. So again, going back, I'm very specific with this 8-year-old reading level of helping very young children connect with their parents. That's not going to be a way for me to promote this type of engagement that I'm doing now, which is identity formation as it relates to vocation. Those are very different topics. Now, when I gave my definition of the identity that I act in, joy strategist, and helping people work through pains, anxieties, and depressions to find the fullness of who they are through joy, that can show up in this work too. But as a focused specialty, I don't have to use that language. So the more focused you are as you specialize, the clearer you will communicate to your target audience. It also means you will signal to other people that you're not the best fit. That's totally okay. And that's true in marketing and with how you present yourself in all circumstances. It's the way we carry ourselves and promote ourselves tells some people that we're a good match for them and others that we're not, right? It's like being really specific on a dating profile. It helps both parties not waste time because it's obvious quicker that we are or are not a good fit. So, value proposition, again, I will email this over, some of the links. This is the book I shared in class, and I'll share it again. The $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy, which I think is accessible to all forms of business, large or small. And he has some frameworks that he's put together on worksheets that I believe are just publicly available. So 100% if they are, I'll send them over. But I think they're just website links for him. And he's done a good job with it. So I'm not going to try to create a digital sheet or summary that knocks that out because I think he does well. So I'll send that sheet over. I think there's 2 sheets that communicates this well. But essentially what you're looking at with value proposition is you want other people to know why they should spend their resources on you. We all value our resources, our money, our time, our mental energy, our emotional energy. So why should we expend it on XYZ? Value proposition does that while also offering some promises in there. Why is it worth the money? Can I reach the goal faster with you than with the other person? Are expectations set right? Are you as the provider eliminating hurdles for me? I know I talked about this in one of the classes, but we're also looking to eliminate the amount of steps the client has to take. So the example I used in one of the classes was the research that I saw, and I apologize if this number is a little bit off, but I think there's an 80% chance of booking a client if you responded to their inquiry within 5 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be next to your phone all day, every day, but that's a lot of time eliminated for waiting for a potential client if they're interested. So how is that a value proposition? It doesn't fit into the actual value proposition equation, but what it's communicating is they have to do less effort to get what they need. And so that's where you also need to be clear about professional boundaries there, whether you're going to have looser boundaries as you're building your business and then tighten them up later as you are more valuable to the public and more desired. Brand identity, just think about companies, Starbucks, Apple, Walmart, McDonald's. You have an idea of what they are. A good brand identity does not mean premium quality and care. McDonald's, for instance, a lot of what you're paying for with their brand identity is familiarity. So in general, you can go to any McDonald's in the country and the food will taste about the same and the service will be about the same. They have a very meticulous system in place to make their brand clear. I think the only area that they really drop the ball there is their ice cream machines and how that's communicated. But then you think of luxury vehicles and luxury purchases that you can make. Those have a specific branding that like it means something when you see them. And it might be a core message like Nike's just do it mentality. I'm blanking on Apple's slogan right now, but a lot of what they push is that innovation and simplicity and integration, software, hardware. There's certain things that you understand about them. And if we're changing our brand identity or identity in general all the time, moving it around, we're signaling to clients that they shouldn't have expectations of what we're going to provide. So brand identity says this is the consistent theme we're aiming at. And then monitor, track, and adjust. So anytime you're doing marketing, track it, monitor it. If it's digital marketing in any way, you're usually going to be provided analytics of some sort. This is true for tracking business. Most things are done on software now, bookkeeping, client tracking, scheduling, and oftentimes these softwares come with ability to run analytics and run reports. Use those to get an idea. Anything that's offline or there's not a system in place, just an Excel or Sheets page, and you should be good to go. Okay, approaches. Marketing is the number one question I get from private practice clinicians and really small businesses, especially ones that can function without a line of credit and need to optimize their usable resources that they have without taking out a loan. So, and it was a popular one that you all brought up for curiosity. So I'm going to do paid ads first because it is, I think, the least used in our world, at least for what I have seen from solo practices. We're competitive in the sense that a lot of people are looking to feel better mentally. So what that means, if you put out a paid ad, it's going to be butting up against other paid ads for services, including corporate national ones like BetterHelp and these online resources. So we're actually competing locally against each other and nationally with online services. Now, generally, I don't like to use the term competing. I think it's more about finding your spot where you're comfortable, you're not feeling threatened, you're not threatening, you are just comfortable in your area. And that's where the niche and focus is helpful. But paid ads is an option. Google, Facebook, what you'd want to do there is just, again, a lot of this is going to be based, I'm not going to keep going back to this, but you've got a somewhat specialty or focus. And I'll say this, and I think I said this in both classes. If you're not sure, or if you're leaning generalist, then what I want you to do is consider who is not a good fit for you and who you don't want to see. So you might say, well, I'm generalist. I can kind of do this. But maybe you say, I don't want to work with anyone under the age of 13. That actually eliminates a large percentage of people, all things considered. So be mindful of who you don't want to see if you don't feel super focused, if you feel generalist, and if you want to, over time, create a deeper specialty, just start to narrow in this, who am I seeing, by deciding who doesn't fit in my purview for clinical work. So that's one way you can do it, and then just make sure you're not signaling to a crowd you don't want to work with, especially with paid ads. And you can use companies for this that probably are a little bit wiser than you would be just jumping in. So consider that, do some research, make a decision on if that feels wise for you. It has the potential to be one of the more expensive starting routes. Doesn't have to be. There's someone here that can cost more depending on what you do. Business cards, that's to each their own. It's kind of the networking currency. So I can't think of any scenario where I've seen it hurt someone to have business cards, but it's not necessarily always going to be super helpful. It depends on your clientele. I didn't use them when I first started. I just had a very strong word of mouth and networking circle that I could bounce around to. So it totally depends on what you're looking for and what kind of clients you want. What I would recommend for a business card is, and if you're just graduating and you're under clinical supervision, your supervisor name has to be on that card, just like it has to be on all documentation and promotional material. So because you are not licensed independently, that's important. You need to make sure that you are promoting yourself in the same way that your documentation promotes you directly to the client. So that is a disclaimer that you're under supervision. It can be fine print. It doesn't have to be bolded everywhere. You can look at examples. I don't think I have one with me. I have a couple business cards from people that would be an example for. But it can be small print. It just needs to be legible on one side. Again, practice name. If you've got a logo, throw that on there. Contact info. Anytime you can be creative with a business card, I say do it. The more you can make yourself unique and stand out, I think that's often quite helpful. And you want to communicate a little bit about what you do. So again, if you have a niche, that's where that language comes in really handy on the back of that card. Social media, got a lot of questions about this one as well. So we are in an age where people are online a lot. One of the things that I have mentioned is to ask yourself the question, the type of clients I want to see, what are they doing and where are they going, right? The example that I often use, that I used in class, was Lamborghini is not going to be advertising on television because their clients are not watching TV throughout the day, right? So you don't want to market where people aren't spending their time. You could have a killer ad for alcohol, but if you market it to a bunch of Baptists, you're not going to sell a lot of alcohol. that matters a lot when you look at social media usage and asking yourself, are my clients on social media? And if they are, when are they on there and what are they doing? So, you know, if you're wanting to advertise toward the younger generation, there's a different type of culture there with how they engage with memes and social media content versus people 60 and up. So the more focus you get, the more you can have an idea. So the example of an unrelated industry that I gave earlier was someone who's a personal trainer and they're advertising or they're trying to work with moms who want to get in shape, feel good, look good about themselves in preparation for their child's wedding, super focused. So what that does is it gives you a narrower window to think critically about social media advertising of, okay, well, what are those people doing? And think about the area you're in, being in this area in Johnson County, and we have a different culture, places like Leawood and Overland Park, than you might in, we'll just say, a rougher county in the US. We might have an increase in people doing Pilates and yoga and going to Whole Foods, right? Where other places, that's not what the moms are prioritizing. Okay. So pay attention to your area, who you're promoting to, and then ask that question, where are they and what are they doing with their time? And then promote in that window. Okay. So you want to promote towards them. And so your social media posts, I see a little bit of back and forth info on, does the time of day that you post matter? A lot of people will say nowadays it doesn't, I've heard. The main pushback I'll give there is, as therapists, we don't need to sell a lot of our product, so to speak, to make a living. We just need, maybe 24 people at a time. So what that means is you can be a little bit more focused there with how you promote. And so also, if you're specializing, you can consider, how do you want to be present online? So maybe you don't want to be on social media. This was a big issue that some of you brought up, and one that people say all the time is like, I'm not a social media person. I don't want to be posting myself. I don't want to be online. So to that, I'll say, don't be fake. It's just kind of uncomfortable when you see people they're functionally just actors online to promote their business, and they're actually, I don't know, it's just odd sometimes. So you have to ask yourself, what does it look like to be fully me? This goes back to our identity conversation. How do I, without any personal moral compromise, promote myself online? And your honest answer might be, I'm not getting behind a camera or in front of a camera. That's okay. You can do promotions that are just your practice space with some captions or a nice song over it, or saying, is this you? Is this you? Are you dealing with this? Are you dealing with this? Your face doesn't have to be on there. There's a lot of big companies that, the owners aren't putting their face on there. There's a lot of small companies where the owners aren't. There's a lot of small companies where the owners are. A lot of small companies will promote their work by showing the work that they do. We can't do that. We can't post videos of us doing clinical sessions online to promote. We're going to be violating a lot of ethics codes there, as well as laws. So you might have to get creative. And if you want yourself on camera, the creativity looks different. If you want yourself behind camera, it looks different. If you want still images, it looks different. You just want to pick a form of marketing that you feel like you can be consistent in, and that you feel like you can stay motivated in, or at the very least disciplined in. So that might be social media. It might not be. One thing you can do is just look up therapists in the area and see how they promote. You can look at their followers, but that's not in our field. The followers is not necessarily indicative of the success of the business. So a social media account in itself can be a business. A YouTube account can be a business. But if your primary focus is to funnel it into more business, then it doesn't have to be horribly successful in terms of followers and subscribers. So at the time of recording this, across all of my social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of it, I believe I currently have less than 1,000 total followers across everything. So what that hopefully would signal is I make no money off of any of those accounts. I have, however, gotten multiple therapeutic and professional inquiries from those accounts. Okay. I don't make money from those accounts, but I get to engage with the community, and I've had people reach out to me to connect, to have a professional relationship and or to engage professionally with me, either clinically or with business and professional coaching. So you can make money from these accounts with having a very little follower base. Part of that is, how are you communicating to your audience? My YouTube account, which is where you'd be watching this, is much more for fun for me, and a way to share thoughts that I have, as well as to just offer sometimes information for free, like this video for the class, but I'm just putting it on there for anyone. The videos I do there on Mondays are personal reflections for me. Occasionally, I'll post reflections about a movie or an article related to overall mental well-being. And I just talk about it. And if people find it useful, they find it useful. My other socials are a little bit more focused on the professionalism side. But the through line for me is I want to have fun doing it. And if I'm not, I don't like it as much. But if you're going to say social media is the route I'm taking, you do need to treat it more like a business. I don't consider social media my primary marketing approach. If it's yours and you really want to make a go at this, you want to make a full structure of how you're going to do this. Most people, that's more than they think. You want to record a couple hours a week, probably, and script for probably more time than that. A lot of videos you see of people promoting themselves online that maybe look off the cuff, a lot of them have a lot of time spent scripting that out and preparing what they're going to say. If you get into talking to a camera and editing and cutting, you'll probably learn that it's, for some people, less intuitive than you think it's going to be. But I'll say this: you don't need a huge online presence to be successful in this field. Do not stress about that. And if you're worried about what people will think of you, just remember that probably the majority of every therapist, like 99.9% of therapists, almost no one will know who they are ever. You have a couple really popular people in the realm of mental health that have broken mainstream. People like Brene Brown, super mainstream. Jordan Peterson, super mainstream. John Deloney, very mainstream. I don't know where you want to place Dr. Phil categorically there. You have people that are kind of psychological, like the self-help world, where it's, okay, are they, I don't actually know some of the names that I could say right now if they have any type of clinical training. But my point is, or Esther Perel has her work and her show, and the couples therapy TV show, The Gottmans, are somewhat mainstream to the general audience. But you're not likely going to be super well known, which means you don't have to worry a lot about what people will think. It's this mix, right? If you're not super well known, you also don't have to worry about looking bad. I think you should prioritize doing a good job, but you're not on blast for the whole world to see. So it's okay, and you can always close the accounts down and delete them if you're just embarrassed for whatever reason. So feel free to experiment with that. But it does take work. I think people underestimate the amount of work the social media side will take if you choose to go that route. And it might be worth it to hire someone to prep formats and templates. Website is a typical staple for most therapists, and probably something every business needs to have, especially if you're using Google Maps and Google My Business. It really helps if there's a website to click on. People really want to know what they're getting into, and they want to know if you're legit. Websites are a way to communicate legitimacy. I could talk for a very long time on websites, so I'm going to try to be quick and to the point. We talked before, a couple slides back, right? I have different reading levels. I encourage the landing page of your website to be at a 3rd grade level and to communicate as little as necessary in order to let people know that you might be a good fit. So I want to communicate the value of joy and suffering and helping people walk through their struggles and find their identity along the way. Don't need to get super detailed. I definitely don't need to utilize language of theory or clinical language in general, right? That just does not need to happen. So I want to be YouTube's or Google Meet's giving me a hard time. So I want to save that depth of language for later. All right. I want to not dive in to deeper clinical and professional language until later. And what I mean by later is 1 or 2 pages deeper into the website. So I would have an initial blurb about who you are, have your logo, your business name there, maybe a picture, explain what you do, have an option every time you provide information about your work, somewhere within that same visual frame, have a click for them to reach out and contact you. Because then you'll just have opportunity there for them to connect whenever they feel that connection versus having to look for you. So remember, you're trying to eliminate as many steps from them as possible. So you want clients to be able to click on your information as soon as they can. One way of doing that is to have a lot of those buttons next to information. And if there's maybe not enough there for a certain person to feel great, in addition to the contact me, you might want a learn more question mark or a learn more button. They can click, it links them to another page on your website that goes into more detail, maybe that high school reading level. Maybe in your about page, there's a link to that page, and there's a link to a deeper information. If they want to know theoretical and clinical lens, they can get all that info. You just don't need to inundate people with that right away in a way that makes them then feel overwhelmed about all the information. So hopefully that makes sense. Start with basic info, and then as often as you can, click links to reach out to you and links to learn more so that they can dive deeper into your website if they want to learn more about you. If you have social media, you want links to that to be accessible on the website. If you're doing blogs, if you're putting out resources, you can just keep linking to those within the website, and they can follow that rabbit trail as much as they want, either for their own personal interest or until they've read enough to feel like they can make a commitment to you professionally. So that's where you can keep extending third grade reading level, high school, college, professional or expert level as they go deeper into the website, but just don't overdo it with people right away. Be smooth and simple with it. So networking is a weird one, and I think it's one that some people put too much effort into. Almost every person I've talked to that does a lot of networking is kind of burnt out by it and feels like it rarely goes anywhere. One thing I want you to look at is if you're saying, I want to network to get referrals, at least in the Kansas City area, that's what everyone is doing. It's like getting 100 people or even a group of 10, 12 people. We'll do that. We'll do a small networking event as an example. It's like getting 10 to 12 people together, and everyone wants a main entree dish, but there's only 2 plates at the table. And it's like you're not actually going to be that helpful to each other. Usually. It's usually people being like, I have openings, I have openings, I have openings, I have openings. Because people who have full caseloads don't feel a need to network as much. Right? So it's usually just people who really need something from the group. But everyone really needs something. So I think these networking events need to be strategic. If your only mindset is, I am deprived and I'm famished, so I'm going here, I would really taper your expectations of what you're going to get. Now, networking is still good. I think you should get to know people. The way that I tend to network is I try to do as much one-on-one as possible to get to know people and understand their work. I'm not looking for referrals. I'm not even looking to refer. What I'm doing is looking for people that I want to continue to engage with within the realm that I work in. Sometimes that means I get referrals from them. Sometimes that means I know that they're good people to send referrals to. Other times I stay in touch with them because they make me feel good. I'm encouraged by them. A lot of the therapy world has a lot of downer behavior. There are a lot of therapists that are just hard for me to have conversations with. They're just complaining all the time. I think a lot of therapists have their own mental health issues that they're working on that just brings the mood down in professional settings. That is not the same as being honest about, I'm struggling with my business and I don't know what to do. That is different than complaining about business and work. Those are very different, and you feel them. You can be in a room full of grief or be in a room full of people who are like, I'm burnt out and don't know what to do, and not feel depressed. You can also be in a room full of people that are pretty successful, but they're just complaining and moaning about everything. It's really draining. So, and no, most people aren't going to lead in with that in networking events, but in the one-on-one, you usually get a little bit more raw engagement, and you can open up conversations and get an idea of, I like to aim for what are people passionate about and what brings them to life. And we get really fun conversations, and then follow-ups from there. And then some of the bigger professional networking events, if you're just going in again with, I need, you'll come off as needy, and you probably won't get to enjoy it as much. Like, just go have fun. If I would say, go to networking events to have fun and engage with the community. If you're not very social or outgoing, this might be draining. So again, this is one of those areas where you have to decide, is this worth the trade-off to do? I actually think, typically speaking, networking is one of the worst returns for the amount of time you have to put into it to the amount of referrals you get back. It can be a jackpot scenario where you find someone who's like, for whatever reason, you're who they need. And this is why knowing your niche is helpful. So think again, if you have a clear way of communicating your niche, the goal of that is when you share it to people and they meet someone who could benefit from your service, you're the first name that pops into their mind. They'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to send them to Ryan because he was super specific and used language that I understand. So that's what you want. And so what that also means is, when I said earlier, where are your potential clients spending their time and energy? What are they doing? Where are they going? Same with networking events. When I was heavily into play therapy, and that was the primary avenue I was doing, was working with small children and their parents oftentimes, some of the best referrals for me are from couples therapists. And this is one that's super non-competitive, where if I'm working with a family or a kid and I have some couples therapists that I'm connected well with, and I think parents could benefit from that, I can say, hey, you should go talk to this person. They're really good, and they're actually a personal friend of mine, and I trust the work they do. And that person could do the same for me. I have gotten a lot of referrals like that, or calls or emails from someone being like, hey, I'm working with these parents, this couple, their kid needs some work. You're the first person that came to mind. Do you have any openings? And despite me changing my specialty a little bit, and I work with kids every week, my specialty has shifted, I still get referrals from these networking people that I have built close relationships with. And then once you can find a couple people that are really good at sending you referrals because you're a good complement to their work, support that relationship a lot. Buy them lunch, buy them coffee, text them, ask how they're doing. Is there anything you can be helpful with? Stay in touch, ask how they're doing. Keep in touch with those relationships, and you'll probably have a couple primary ones. So, you don't need a list of 100 people, but just stay in touch to relationships that are important. And we do that with friends and family as well, right? So, and then word of mouth is kind of the gold standard, and that is what you probably want to aim at long term. Is the work you do is so good that people are telling all their friends, right? One of the biggest compliments I got was someone sent me something that they saw on the Kansas City subreddit where people were looking for therapists. Someone on there recommended me to the therapist thread. That is word of mouth, and that felt great. So, and I don't know who that was, and I'm not going to look into that because that's their life, right? So whoever I was working with that thought that was helpful and shared on Reddit, it was encouraging to me, and I must have been doing, at least for them, a good enough job that they felt compelled to respond to a post and say, you should go talk to Ryan. That's what you're aiming for with word of mouth. Do a good job with what you're given so that those people say, you should also go to this person. Directories. Directories are great. So they're not for everyone, and some of them cost, some of them don't. So Psychology Today is the one that most therapists will know. Now, assuming nothing's changed, you can get on there for about 6 months for free, and then you pay afterwards. Mixed bag for this one. I rarely talk to anyone who loves this service. A couple people get like the bulk of their caseload from here, and then other people I know have gotten nothing or they maybe get one. I think Psychology Today tries to make you think they're helpful up front by pushing you early on to make sure you get someone. But then it can taper off, and there's mixed reasons why. So I would say use it. It's a free service to start. And it's like $30 a month, which, to be honest, that can pay for itself if you just get one client every 3 months. Even if you're only charging $100 and you see that client even every other week, that's $200 a month. So $200 a month for a $30 subscription. So even if you're only getting a couple a year and they're landing and they're consistent, that can still be a worthwhile expense for your business. SEO, search engine optimization, is important to note with anything you're doing online. How you do that without paying money is you want the internet to know that you're still active and you're not just a dead website. There's a lot of dead accounts, dead websites, things that are just on the internet that nobody's doing anything with. So the internet and these algorithms are not incentivized to tell people to go to you, because why would they when there's other people creating more for that system, for the web, for the algorithms? So make edits somewhat frequently to every account that you have. On Psychology Today, the usual recommendation I get for people is you will have to put your radius, like I'm located here, and then it'll help push you towards people in that radius. I'd move that radius dot around a little bit within your general area. Obviously, don't put it like 50 miles away from where your practice is, but you can move it like 2 or 3 miles around and just see if that changes the search, and also lets Simple Practice, or not Simple Practice, Psychology Today know that you're active and you're doing stuff. So that is useful. And I'll also encourage you to have no more than 3 specialties or areas of interest. Why? Because especially as interns graduating, you do not have 3 specialties. You might not even have one. I had one specialty when I graduated because I did a separate training program during grad school. That was 150 hours of training. And even that, I was done with the training, but still had to do supervised work before I can have it as an official title. Some people get EMDR training during school. That's possible. It's rare, but we get specialized training at times. So you can have specialties, but usually you're looking at areas of interest. And that doesn't contradict niche specialty conversation earlier. A niche can turn into a specialty as you specialize in that thing. So try not to do more than 3, because again, man, the amount of Psychology Today accounts that I look at when I'm just trying to help people out, or maybe even if I'm looking for a referral for someone, and like I work with anxiety, depression, parents, kids. They'll say like teens in there, and it'll also say bipolar, and I work with personality disorders and trauma. And I'm like, I actually don't know what you're going to be helpful with. Because even though as therapists, we take a national exam that by definition says we're experts in everything, we're not. So we are generalists. But when I'm looking for someone, I want to know, who are you trying to work with? Who are you trying to see? Why should I tell someone to reach out to you? And that's going to be my words saying, go talk to this person. And I have no idea what you actually do. So it's same for listing like 6 different theories that you use. You probably I've gone a whole tangent of that. Pick your theory, and you don't have to stay there forever, but don't just be hopping around, because you want to have consistent clinical work. So if you're changing your theory case by case and week to week, you're not really grounded in anything except how you feel for the week. And that's kind of scary when you think about long-term care. So just be mindful of that. So that's a long way to say, again, stick to maybe 3 areas of interest or specialization categories. And then cold and warm outreach. As therapists, cold outreach is hard because we can't really solicit. And I think there's even sometimes a fine line with the word solicit. So we can't solicit or ask people if they're interested in therapy, right? So what does that mean? That means this category is usually not the best for everyone. Where it comes in handy is reaching out to organizations or groups for contact. And let me also say with directories, there's a lot of free ones. A lot of schools have them. A lot of local communities have them. I think, is it Discovery? I'm probably getting that wrong. Might have a board. LGBTQ Guild has a list. Some places just let you list yourself in a directory. They might vet you a little bit, but it's where someone's needing therapy and they can go to a certain list, and it's connected to them as a population group and a demographic. So if you and I'll just use LGBTQ Guild in Kansas City because it's an easy one. And I actually feel like they changed their name recently, but I think if you type that up, it'll come up still. But for them, anyone who is in that demographic might look there first for referrals. If you specialize with that population, go register on their directory. This goes back to, what are your target audience doing with their time? This is also why it's important, and again, using LGBTQ population, if you are not part of that population, you need to get involved with the population, because you want to signal that you can be helpful and that you understand things in that demographic. So if you're sitting there thinking with your mind, which doesn't overlap with the demographic, you're not probably thinking about the day-to-day struggles, the general goals, what this group is doing with their time. And yes, this generalizes your demographics, and everyone's their own person, but there are themes with what people do, right? An easy example is if your demographic is kids, the majority of them in this country are going to be in school from like a 7 to 3 p.m.-ish time frame. You have kids in co-ops, you have kids that are homeschooled, you have kids that are in private schools with weird hours. You have exceptions to this. But to market towards exceptions can be hard unless that is your demographic. So you want to start with the idea that, hey, most of the kids I'm going to be seeing are going to be busy during this time frame. So how do I work around that? So that's kind of what you do when you do this generalization of a population, is you think about what are the majority of them doing with their time and go that way. And then maybe as that's less necessary or that starts to dry up over time, potentially, it wouldn't probably for kids, you can start to look at the outliers there, edge cases. So cold outreach just means reaching out to someone that you don't know or that you weren't recommended to. So that would be like you want to do family therapy. So you start reaching out to schools and maybe churches and communities, like community centers and places that help with the community. And you say, hey, I do family therapy. And so, you're like reaching out to where families go. And you come up with some sort of pitch or conversation starter to say, I'd love an opportunity to help out families in your community. And you roll with that. That's cold outreach. They don't know who you are. You have no built-in trust. Warm outreach is there's some initial connection. So, for instance, I do trainings through my business's training program. And if I were to send out an email to all of you in the class that we had and say, hey, I'm doing this training, love for you guys to be there. That's a warm outreach because you know me a little bit. We can talk first name. We can have a conversation. I'm not a new face. And I've set some standard of trust and reliability in how you see me. And that might be a standard that's bad. That can happen too with people. But we have some sort of connections. Same way I mentioned, hey, you can email me with questions. If you shoot me an email and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I was in your class at Friends the other day. I'm going to make that connection quickly. That's a warm outreach. And it works for recommendations. So I also do clinical supervision. So you might say, oh, I have a supervisor, but someone else still is needing one. And because you enjoyed interacting with me, you might say, hey, go talk to Ryan. He seems decent enough. That's a warm outreach too, because it's a recommendation where there's some level of knowing people. There's usually not that, hey, go check that out for cold outreach. And this is also how word of mouth works as well. So warm outreach is also your phone. So this is where I think it's really helpful right when you have permission to start promoting yourself clinically. Go through all of your texting, phone call contacts, every Facebook friend you have, everyone in your email list. And you're going to do this through the legal, ethical lens of how you can promote as a therapist. And do that warm outreach one. Hey, I'm opening up a practice and it's at this location. I didn't bring this up yesterday. I shared with one of you, but do an open house. Say, hey, I'd love for you to come check out the place, learn about what I'm doing. And you're letting all your friends and family know about the work that you do. Ethically, you can't see any of them for therapy, but they all know people. And it really helps when you can see the space or when they can say, hey, I know so-and-so, you should go see them. So go through your list of people and tell them what you do. And you can say, if you know anyone who might benefit from my service, here's the information. Would love to connect and see if I can be helpful. That's warm outreach. So hopefully that's helpful. Short slide, but long info. So we'll keep going. Okay. Administrative and organizational. So these are a couple areas that are just going to be constant. Emails you can't get away from. You have to do notes and documentation. Finances are always going to be relevant with the work that you do. Cannot get away from that. Correspondence, emails counts as that as well. Phone calls, interactions with people. If you have some warm outreach going through here, that's texting. You know, your cousin might reach out and say, hey, there's one of the people at my frat house is looking for a therapist. Are you allowed to see them? That's kind of general interaction for your work. Why are these all here? You need to have systems to keep these organized and structured. So think about not getting behind on your notes, not getting behind on emails, documentation, staying up on budget, tracking expenses, things like that. I'll be blunt. I go through seasons of doing a better job at this than others. My general goal is that maybe other than a weekend day or vacation, all of this is clean and nothing's left unattended within a 24-hour period of when it was produced or brought to my attention. One of my favorite things is to open up my email and it's empty. I love that. It's fun. And I do an organization system. So on screen, you will see the real example of how my emails are organized. So yeah, I'm not going to open up all of the categories here. And at a certain point, it becomes not HIPAA compliant to show you everything in my emails. So these are screenshots of the labels, which if you are not adept at Gmail, that's more or less just folders within your email account. So on the left is how I have things categorized. Anything that has a little triangle next to it is a drop down. So if you see in the middle on the right of your screen, 7-year holds, I did the drop down to show you what that looks like. So how I track clients there is anyone that I've terminated with goes in those folders. So in 2021, if I had a final session with you, you know, my name's Ryan Miller. So if I had a session with RM, Ryan Miller, if I was seeing him, and our last session was in 2021, he has a file. On the left, you can see clients. So all my active clients, all correspondence with them is filed there with their initial. If I'm actively seeing 2 people with those initials, I put a number 2 next to the person who I started seeing second. Pretty straightforward. So if I termed with RM in 2021, he's an RM. And once I meet the legal timeline for having to keep documentation, I will delete that info and everything in that folder. So 2020 would be gone, and then 2021. I can do that month to month if I want per account. No first session for me are people that completed paperwork, but I never met with. So once paperwork is completed, they can technically be considered your client clinically. So I still put them in there, and I just delete them later. Supervisions, I have 4 categories. Clinical supervisor is me as a clinical supervisor. So the drop-down menu there are my supervisees that I see post-grad. The post-grad supervision was my own. So all the correspondence or information that was in email about my own journey to licensure is in there. PT, play therapy supervision, because I had to receive that. And then student supervision was the interns that I supervised. Probably easily the most used and helpful category is this one in the bottom right, the follow-up and review. So I have delayed, reading, training, and short term. So what this means is maybe I'm trying to schedule with a client. They reach out and say, "Hey, are you free this week?" And I say, "Yep, I can do this time, this time, this time." And they probably won't respond right away. I don't like emails just sitting in my inbox. So what I'll do is I've sent my response, and so I will file that in the short term folder. Short term to me is anything that I plan to review again within a week. So me being in a good habit would check that daily, but it implies within the week. So at any given time, the most recent message within there from any particular person should be within 7 days. And if I don't get a response, I will follow up. And then eventually it gets filed away if something doesn't work out. Delayed is something that we'll come back to later. So that might be, I've had this happen a couple times. Clients say, "Hey, I want to work with you," or this is prospective clients. "I need to wait until the end of summer so I can figure out my schedule for me and my kids, but you were recommended. It just feels weird to start now. We're going on an end of summer vacation, whatever. This is 4 weeks out." So we'll get as far as we can in that conversation, and I'll put them in delayed. So I also would check delayed weekly and just see what's recent. What do I need to come back to? Reading and training is as it sounds. These are trainings that I'm interested in that are either upcoming or cyclical, or readings. So I get a lot of emails for articles that are really interesting, things that take my time to read that are interesting. And I don't always have the time right then to do it. And again, I don't want it just sitting in my inbox. So I file them over there. So my goal is that everything has a home. And if you see on the far left, I have miscellaneous. Not everything has a category that makes sense. And I don't want labels or folders that just have 2 or 3 things in them. I'm totally content with the miscellaneous. And then I go and edit these categories and recategorize them every couple months to make sure they're still doing what I need. And then every so often I go in and try to delete maybe 100 out of them. Just like, all right, I don't need this anymore. Don't need this. I'm never going to read that. This miscellaneous I don't actually need it. I just kept it for some reason. So cleaning it out. But email management's important. Hey, AI. Yeah, so this is something that I was hopeful to see more ethical standards put in place on. I get that it's changing. I was really excited to see that the AAMFT Code of Ethics was updated effective the start of 2026 this year. The previous one was updated in 2015. And just to be honest, I've been frustrated at how long it's taken for this to get updated. 11 years is too long. I don't like it. And I have mixed feelings about the current update of no mention of AI whatsoever. The caveat are these 3 areas. And this is clinical. We're going to talk about it in a business setting in a second. Clinically speaking, it mentions, I think the language is, look at 6.1 real quick, technology assisted services. Marriage and family therapists may use technology to support and facilitate the delivery of treatment, right? So to support and facilitate, so that means it can be used in the process of providing care. So that can mean AI, right? And then look at 6.2 at the bottom. MFTs, quote, do not use technology in place of their own independent treatment decisions. All right. So you can make an argument there that's like, I'm not supposed to type into ChatGPT, what should I diagnose this person? And it might do a stellar job, right? But we're not supposed to do that. What's interesting, though, is everything in here can work. The language that they use is just as helpful as using Google. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more info on AI. This feels very safe to me. It's still movement, but a specific 6 point whatever number with the technology section on AI usage, even if it's out of date in 6 months, would have just been nice. But instead, like with a lot of ethics and laws, we have to read into them a lot. And you have software like Simple Practice that has AI note taker. And now I believe they take the brunt of making sure that that's legally and ethically compliant. Great. So that's on them. But this code of ethics, like, what does that mean? So we can use it to facilitate, but it can't make decisions. So the note taker just takes notes. But you will see more and more of this technology come out to help make decisions. That is for sure going to happen. And it currently does. I mean, Google does that already, right? If you're like, I don't know about this, you can type it into Google. You can go into an AI software and say, I'm trying to figure out if somebody has a bipolar 1 diagnosis. I'm going to give you everything I know about the client. Tell me if this is bipolar 1. You can technically do that. I do think that's there's a weird line where that's a HIPAA violation. I wouldn't be comfortable using the language I just used for that. And AI can be wrong. So again, this is not a clinical class, but I just want you to be aware that you're not going to be able to hide from this as a topic. And it brings up its own ethics with how we talk about, or the current conversation around data centers being built. People seem all over the place with AI usage. The general consensus is a lot of people don't like it, but most of the professional world will tell you need to use it or you're going to fall behind. So you have to wrestle with that yourself. From a clinical healthcare perspective, it's an important conversation that fits right within this ethics conversation. And definitely HIPAA. So you might start to see more healthcare specific AIs come out with BAAs or HIPAA compliant software built into them, which could be useful. But right now, I would say move forward with trepidation and be careful. The main emphasis here, though, is on business usage. Let's see, okay. So for business, how this could look is however you want it to look, to be honest. So I know therapists that are using AI for everything. I know therapists that are running conferences that are like all AI focused. I'm not going to get super opinionated about this. What I will tell you is I utilize AI for professional assistance. So I ask it questions that I would love to be able to pay someone to do at my business, but I can't. So what do I do with that? To me, it's important to always validate it. So I have it help with business decisions with, I'll sometimes ask it legal questions for my business. Anything that I'm asking it that is important, that's not just me having fun or goofing off with the software, it has to provide resources and cited sources that I can click on and go look and verify that it got the information there. I won't use anything it produces that is produced without research or at least article links. And that's how I utilize it for learning more about the world of business and how to run my business. And then I also will have it help me sometimes just structure and order elements and tasks within my business for some accountability and some streamlining. So a lot of website services now have AI integrated to help you design your website. So you're going to see it pop up a lot. Gmail has it now too, where you can ask it questions. So the big takeaway for this topic, and we're pretty much done with it because I don't want to spend too much time on it, is to wrestle through how you want to approach it. And for some people, it's not a wrestle. They're like, it's a tool, just start using it. But for a lot of people, it is wrestle. So if it's a wrestle, you do have to deal with it. If you're starting a business now and you plan to do this for a couple decades, you cannot avoid this. It's happening. So whether you choose to use it or not, make your decision. But you do, I feel like, owe it to yourself in the work that you're doing to try to stay on top of what this is and what it means and the implications for your business. And me talking to private practice clinicians here, or soon to be private practice clinicians, what does this mean in a healthcare and HIPAA compliant world? And I don't know the answer yet. So I would watch it. People who are experimenting with it, watch them, see how it looks. If you know people who are using the Simple Practice AI note taker, ask them how it's going. Does it feel reliable? Does it feel good? Does it help? So yeah, just move forward carefully and mindfully. So that's my recommendation there. Questions or thoughts, we're on a screen, so I'm not going to wait for responses. Send them my way if you got them. So burnout is next. And I'm going to make sure we're still rolling live. Perfect. Good. Okay. So, burnout. What is it and have you experienced it? There are definitions of this. There are subjective definitions. Some issue I have with some of the research, and I have a ton of research here that I'm going to show you. But some research I struggle with when it's self-report. Burnout is a pop culture phrase now. People use it just in TikToks, they throw it out. The same way they use traumatized or ADHD, OCD sometimes too. People joke about having autism or they have a little bit of the tism. You'll hear people say that, right? Like, this does two things when scientific language becomes mainstream language. It brings awareness to the thing, which is cool. And it runs the risk of hyper colloquializing it and diminishing what it really is. Trauma currently is dealing with a bit of an identity crisis because we're moving the definition around of what trauma is. People online are saying they're traumatized. People were saying, you had this bad experience as a kid where you didn't want to get on the roller coaster and your parents made you and you're traumatized. Or it was just stressful. So we actually have to decide what is trauma, like what is actually happening biologically. Because just because you didn't like something doesn't mean you're traumatized, right? But you also don't want to dismiss someone because maybe it was traumatizing. There's this internal experience that happens, but also your mindset affects that. So there was a push a couple of years ago to have, there were some students on a campus trying to get homework banned, and it's a college campus, and their reasoning was it adds a lot of stress and it causes emotional and mental trauma because it's a stressful school. And there was also at the same time a push to change certain words that were being used, implying that words can cause trauma. And so we also have to look at anti-fragility and being able to withstand difficult things and hear words we don't like and not spiral because of that. But where are we going to draw the line? And I think that's where the science side of this is going to be very helpful. And we can look at burnout like trauma with a individualistic and collectivistic perspective. So the example here would be if you say to someone, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? We've heard that. Some people use it and some people don't like it at all. Here's what I think is helpful to understand. As an individual, the more you can take accountability and responsibility for where you're at and what you have control over, the better. So what that means is anytime you can, you do need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and take care of the problems that you are facing. It doesn't matter if that person caused the problem or you caused the problem. This is my life and I got to handle that. Same thing we do clinically. It's not fair that your parents treated you that way and did that. And it happened and you're stuck here now and they're not going to fix it. So it sucks, but you have to do this yourself now. I'll help you as your therapist. Can we get more people to help you? But it's still yours to hold and handle. But in a collective sense, I can't tell a whole culture to do that, right? Or a whole people group. So there's this individualistic experience that says that. But then if I just say that to someone else in a group setting, or when we see people say it on the news, you get certain people being like, you don't understand my situation. And it's true. So in a collectivist sense, we want to be as helpful to people as we can, hear how we can be useful. In a personal sense, the more we can help ourselves, the better we can help others. So if I'm going around saying, well, this generation's just too weak and doesn't know what hard work looks like, that's probably just not true, right? Because there's going to be certain people that are very hard workers, and there are going to be certain people who aren't. And so on the individual level, you can change your language than on the collective level. That matters with burnout because we'll self-report differently. Just like someone will say, my dad hit me all the time as a kid, but I'm not traumatized by it. It just sucks. And someone else will say, my dad threatened to punch me, and I still haven't gotten over it. And I'm traumatized. Who's right? And are they both wrong? And so, what's the definition? And what if someone works 70 hours a week and says, I'm not burnt out at all. I love this. And someone else was working 30 hours a week and is like, I'm totally burnt out. But then I go on a news program and I say, um, you shouldn't even be talking about burnout unless you're working over 50 hours a week. Well, I don't know everyone's situation. The person working 30 hours a week might actually just struggle to be that effective. And the job they have matters. The management pressure matters. Their personality matters. Whether they like the job matters. Person working 70 hours a week might have fantastic management, fantastic pay, tons of flexibility for when they work, and love the job. And their personality might be just they love working. So we also can't just say, well, this many hours equals burnout or this exact balance. We talked previously in class with both classes about work-life balance. That all connects. So we're all responsible for our experience. And that also means, how do we be honest about things like burnout and trauma? And how do we assess it in people we care about? How do we tell someone that they need to step up and work harder versus tell them they need to take a break? It's really hard to know that line. And when you think about yourself, it's really hard to know your own line. So therefore, how do we talk to other people about it? So yeah, these talking points are interesting. So here's a definition. Burnout is sustained misalignment between identity, responsibility, and capacity. World Health Organization would say that burnout is defined as an occupational phenomenon resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. They identify 3 dimensions of this: energy depletion / exhaustion, mental distance / cynicism towards work, and reduced professional efficacy. You can pause if you want to think about these definitions. A concept that I like to consider, and I don't have a strong opinion about it, I just think it's interesting to think about, is overworked versus underrested. So some people reframe this overworked idea, this burnout, is you're not overworked, you're just underrested. It's not that you're working too much, it's that you're not resting enough. And you might say, isn't that the same thing? It's not. Earlier, I talked about indulgence versus rest. And I don't know if I talked about this in both classes, but the example I gave is I can scroll on my phone on reels and shorts for probably like 5 minutes before I start to not benefit from that anymore, and it becomes indulgence. And we might say, how many minutes or hours of video games can I play before I'm indulging in it? And I'm overindulging, and it's not helpful and relaxing. What about TV? Maybe even sitting out by the pool or on the beach if you have access to one, right? Where does our line of rest and relaxation become laziness, procrastination, and overindulgence? That's important to know. It's really helpful now moving forward with this whole topic if you can more clearly identify, what is rest? What is it to you? What is rest and recovery? And what really is it? So when I say what is it to you, I don't mean to sit there and be like, well, I think it's this and I think it's this. No, it's like, what actually rejuvenates you? Because it's not always what you want in the moment. And I just got distracted that my freaking quotation mark after efficacy is facing the wrong way. That stinks, but we won't pay attention to it. I know for me, if I have 4 hours of rest time and I spend all of it scrolling on my phone, I should have just worked at that point, because I'll feel like brain mush, I'll be more depressed, and nothing will have gotten done. Versus if I take a 15-minute break to scroll on my phone and maybe on a nice sunny day sit outside, that's actually probably more restorative than the 4 hours of just sitting there wasting my time. It's really interesting. So paying attention to what actually rejuvenates your spirit, your sense of self, your life. Pay attention to that. I think it's noticeable if you pay attention and just see what actually is rest, and pay attention to what do I want to do versus what do I need to do. I want to turn on a video game and play right now, but it's actually one of those days where I probably just need a 90-minute nap. I don't really want to, but I think my life will be better. That can be really hard to do, is to separate want and desire from need. This matters with burnout. We don't always have control, right? If you're working at an agency, or if you have a boss that kind of sucks, or if you're in the building phase of your business and practice, you don't get as much of a say. And so, actually, what that means is you got to be really good at this, because you might get 20 minutes a day to use wisely. I'll tell you right now, don't be scrolling on your phone for that. I'm not going to cast judgment, but if you're tired and burnt out and feeling destroyed all the time, and you're like, so I just spend it on my phone, I'm going to challenge that. What's the phrase that's, I don't know how popular it is, but like, revenge is your bedtime procrastination. You feel like you have no control over your day, so you procrastinate things in the evening and waste time because you can control that. You say, I can at least control feeling like I'm having fun and destroying my evening and my next morning. It's a cycle and it gets hard to break. So, things to consider. Okay, here's 5 areas that I would say you can consider for avoiding burnout: awareness of self, refined rest, role clarity, identity alignment, and self care. Awareness of self is checking in. What's happening internal? Does my body really need more caffeine right now? Or does it need something else? Refined rest. We talked about that in the last slide. Do I need a nap, or do I need to scroll on my phone for an hour? So, refining what rest means. Role clarity. This is huge. And it's as it sounds. Being clear on what your role and function is. I am a broken record and a loud gong in every organization that I'm a part of for this, because my experience is people suck at this. Everyone's like, oh, you can help with this and you can help with this, and thanks for helping, and and it just confuses who's responsible for what. And I don't think that means you say, not my problem, I have this role. That's not my problem either. What it means is you can make a clear line in the sand where this is their responsibility, and then I can choose to be helpful versus feeling ashamed at myself for not giving more. That makes sense? This conversation I have a lot with my church that's important with me, is everyone's capacity will go up if we know exactly what our role is within different ministries and volunteering positions. I worked with a group practice one time, and this was a huge area of focus that I was helping them with. I've helped a lot of group settings like this as well, and private practice, solo practices too, when there's more than one person there. Even on an internal level, when we have multiple roles that we carry as a private practice clinician. My role as a business owner, my role as a therapist, and they each need room. I talked about this earlier with the wearing different hats and how to align those roles and give them all room. So, role clarity. So I was helping a practice at one point that utilized a lot of different services and had multiple people in there contributing in different roles that weren't just being a therapist. And one of the biggest things I push was documentation explicitly stating what they're doing, what they're expected to do, and what they're being paid to do. And I push as often as I can how many hours of their time that's expected to take. Sometimes that's subjective and it can change week to week, or it's just the task needs done, right? So I don't push that too hard. But you want to have an expectation of what's to be done, where at any time, both parties can say, I'm meeting that or I'm not. So one practice that I worked with, once we were done with this, their overall self-report for clarity went up. Everyone agreed. We understand our roles better. And actually productivity went down. Why is that? The reason was people were like, I'm being overworked. And they said no to things. And it wasn't even they said, I'm not doing it. It was when it became clear, everyone realized, oh, shoot, you're overextending. And like everyone was overextending out of kindness. And that's a temptation. I know we talked about it in one of our classes. We're going to lean as caretaking professionals towards being more helpful than we need to be. So usually what we have to practice as therapists is separating out the idea that everything's our responsibility all the time. I have to help every soul, or I should be ashamed of myself. Usually we need to practice saying no and practice saying, I know that this isn't going to go well if I don't help. It's not my responsibility. And you can wrestle through this. I don't think it's the same as being like, that's not my problem. I'm not doing that. I'm not picking up that trash on the ground. I'm not going out of my way to hold the door open for that person. That's different. It's different to say, I'm the only person that matters. Screw everyone else. Help yourself. Versus, I'm going to burn out or I'm going to hit a limit if I keep saying yes to this. This once, fine. I can't do it again. Sorry. I know you asked me last time and I said I could. Today I can't. I'm leaving at this time. I got to be home for my family. I know you said you need an answer to this tonight. We've discussed that I can't be given last minute requirements like that. Tonight, I don't have the time to do that. And per our arrangement, I'm not required to. I'll get back to you in a couple days after the weekend. So that's role clarity. Identity alignment. We've talked about this throughout, none in this slide really, but in class we talked about being aligned with your identity actually matters a lot. You want personal alignment because then that puts you in a position to morally agree or disagree with positions you're put in. This violates what I believe in. This violates what I was told we'd have to do at this company. I'm not doing that. The hardest part of the identity alignment when saying no is you have to be willing to lose out on external rewards, including being fired and including losing opportunity. Because if any one of your morals can be purchased in any way, then your values are for sale to other people. So if I say, this is not appropriate to treat a client this way and I won't do it, and your boss says, I'll give you a $50,000 bonus, because if you do this, I know it's unethical and wrong, but we'll avoid a lawsuit that will cost tons of money. So I'll give you a $50,000 bonus to do this. And you're like, okay. So what you've just told yourself is that your morals are for sale. Money is more important than doing the right thing. And you might justify that and be okay. But if you are telling yourself that's not true, you have to say no to that. It also means saying yes to certain things that are hard. When the desire to say no comes up, where you say, no, I have to say yes to this because this is the right thing. I'm aligned with who I am as much as possible within my work. And so we do that by as much as possible finding work that aligns with our values, or understanding that the work we're doing doesn't always do that. And we're going to be a cog in the wheel a little bit. The example I've used is politics. If you enter into a political system because you're like, I love this system, I want to run for office and tell everyone, I'm going to make sure we keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this. People are like, yeah. And what you're doing is you're fighting to keep certain things out that are trying to get in, versus the person that says, I can't stand the way the system is running. And you are entering politics and your position is, I'm going to change this, change that, change that. So what you're trying to do is, I'm going to try to bring all this in. That's a different arena to fight in. You'll probably go to work every day and get pushback. So the identity alignment says, this is who I am and this fight is worth it. I'm going to keep doing it. And self-care, is it the next slide? No. So we're going to talk about self-care wheel, which is getting more popular and I like. And I have a twist on it that I honestly just prefer to use an adapted version, which doesn't change much of how it's made. So I feel like I'm just adding to something that's been well made already. But what I mean by self-care is taking care of yourself. You have to be well cared for to take care of other people well. This can happen within a company, and it can also happen with how they're handling things outside the company. So that's when businesses have mental health resources, when they're kind with their vacation and off days, when they're willing to give you some leeway to make sure you're okay. Where, if you have your parent passes away and you need time off for a funeral, they're like, don't worry about it. And we'll even pay you a little bit. Like, we want you to be okay. Like, that helps a lot. As a business owner, that means you have to give yourself the same permissions. Usually the hard part is you're like, I can't take time off. I barely have enough money as it is. This is really hard to do, the self-care piece, when you're building your business. What I want to encourage there is don't violate morals, prioritize healthy and good relationships, and healthy rest. So, yeah, and that's important. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. This will be mostly seamless for you guys, but I'm going to take a personal recording break, and you will be jumped right back in a few seconds. Right. So burnout. So this next slide is definitely detailed. And so a couple things to pay attention to. When I say core pillars of burnout and prevention, I think these are pretty good. Again, I'll provide all the research evidence on the slides and sent out. But I'm just going to present these items as core tenets to pay attention to, some definitions, and maybe ways to prevent them from faltering. So as with everything, take these and work through them in your own way and ask yourself what makes sense to you as you navigate an experience with burnout and prevention and overall longevity with your vocation. So identity we talked about. So burnout worsens when your worth is tied to productivity, client outcomes, approval, business success. So if you are only worthwhile and valuable when outcomes are successful, then you will be entirely dependent on those things for validation to exist. Now, the biggest area of pushback I get when I work with people, both clinically and professionally, is, but if I'm accomplishing more, doesn't that just by definition make me more valuable? And it does, only in the sense of us thinking in pure black and white numbers. So if you are just a cog in the machine and you are just numbers on paper, yeah. And a lot of places of employment might treat you that way. Like, hey, your numbers are down. It's nothing personal. The system says you got to go. And so that is often how we are treated. However, that does not mean your value as a human being is connected with that. And learning to separate those things out is important. So, if I'm auditioning for a musical performance or an acting thing, art, I think is easy for this. And people are like, hey, you're just not there yet, or a sports team. It doesn't mean I suck or I'm a bad person. It means the skill set that I'm active in right now is not meeting a threshold to make it to XYZ level of approval in that objective context. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person, and it doesn't mean I don't have usefulness in my existence. So this is easier, I think, for us to understand with things that aren't our job. For some reason, we have a tendency to tie this up way more with employment than with other hobbies or interests or things that we're doing. An artist who cares very purely about their craft doesn't care a lot about if they are successful in the eyes of the world. Would they love to be viewed that way? Perhaps. Would they love to make a living off that? A lot would say yes. But it's not what defines them. So keep doing their craft because it's something they love and they identify with it. So how do you prevent this burnout? It's to stay rooted in who you are made to be, not just what you produce. And the phrasing of not just what you produce implies, yeah, there's some element of that, like pay attention to outcomes a little bit. Just it can't be connected to identity. That's the key takeaway. So number 2 is clarity. So overwhelm often comes from unclear priorities, unclear problems, and unclear next steps. We talked about this with role clarity earlier. You kind of have to know what's going on. So training that I've been prepping to give is on this overwhelm to action. How do you move from feeling overwhelmed to taking action steps? A lot of that is clarity. Just what do I need to do? What is the step? So if you're working for someone and they're just super vague and they're not providing that clarity, you're like, I need help. Like, what do you want from me? And when with our own work, if we're owning a business and we look at it and say, I don't know why I'm not making money or not bringing in clients or why I can never get on top of my work, you have to look at what is throttling and what is bottlenecking and preventing growth. So right when you find that, it's similar to people saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. You have to find the area where everything's getting throttled and pulled back, clear on that, work on it. Sometimes that's easier said than done. Like, okay, I identified the thing, but what do I do? Well, now you're back in the same role, right? So if I'm identifying that my issue with my business growth is I can't get enough clients. So the clients I do see, it goes great. I feel like I'm balancing life well. And really the only thing I feel like is going on that's a problem is I can't get people to get in the door. Like I don't know where to find clients. So I have a client acquisition problem, maybe a client lead problem. And so that's what I need to solve. Okay, I got clarity. More people need to know me. So I have clarity on what the problem is, but now I might have a whole open door of, okay, now I have to ask a new clarity question to focus that in even further. And that new clarity question comes down to, okay, they're not coming in. So now what's the new problem? That would fit the unclear next step. I know what I need to prioritize. I know what the problem is, but what's the now layer deeper problem in this stack? Okay, how do I market? Is it a issue with how I'm communicating? Maybe it is. Maybe I need to focus in on how I'm communicating the work I do. Maybe I need to do more marketing. Maybe I need to change avenues. And then maybe, let's just say you decide I need to change avenues. Great. Which avenue now? So you just keep honing it in until you find the area that needs sewn up and create clarity and then stack that back up. So the prevention here is to identify the real constraint and choose the next aligned action. Sorry. Number 3 is capacity. So burnout happens when responsibility exceeds your actual emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, or operational capacity. Are you pushed over your limit pretty much? How do you prevent this? You be honest about your limits and stop treating every demand as if it's yours to carry. So obviously you can presume that clarity on your role helps with this a lot, like knowing what you're supposed to do, because then you can have more clarity on your capacity. If I know what my role is, this is my limit. And for therapists, we'll get to this in a second with boundaries, but that's going to be one, is identifying capacity and creating boundaries around that by saying no. So be honest about your limits and know that not every issue is yours to take on. When you're running a business and you're the only person running it, this gets hard because it all is your responsibility. And you might be asked to go past your capacity. So what you want to do is really hone this in on areas where you really don't have to carry more than you ought to. So that might be clear boundaries around client access to you, how you set time aside for administrative work, whereas just scatterly trying to do it throughout the day. Maybe you have set aside time. I recommend having it essentially like a closed door clinical hour. I can't be disturbed and I have to show up at this time. Doors shut at the start of the hour for me to work on XYZ, creative projects, administrative work. It's time for emails or notes, things like that. So sometimes capacity is just setting aside the right amount of time, which kind of leads into structure a little bit, which is a lack of systems turning into normal work into constant mental load. So so structure is often a systems issue, which we were talking about before. Do you have your business structured in a way that benefits you and your clients? And this is done through building rhythms. This would be the prevention section. Workflows, administrative blocks, like I was talking about, documentation systems, and overall processes for your business. Popular book is the E-Myth Revisited, E standing for entrepreneur myth. And that book's all about systems. Systems are helpful. And like we talked about with scheduling, you don't want to make oppressive systems. So you want to make one that gives you permission to flow fully with your work. So again, in the starting phases of work, this might be really aggressive because you got to grow something. But the more structure you have, the more it's easy just to know this is what I got to do right now. And having those work rhythms and workflows then asks for less of you mentally if you just know that's what you're doing, right? It's like learning, if you're trying to do a new workout routine, you got to, am I holding the weights right? Am I doing this thing right? Am I doing, and eventually you could do it without any reference. You can just roll with it. Or you move to a new home and you're like, I don't know my route to work, and you need the GPS, and you don't know alternate routes. Something happens. Eventually you can do that drive almost by a sense of feeling after so long. And that's what structure and rhythms help with in systems. It creates maybe not an autopilot mode, but it helps flow, helps with workflow and life flow. So number 5, boundaries. Boundaries as they pertain to burnout. We talked about this a little bit already. That every unclear yes creates hidden debt. So another way to look at this, outside that phrasing, is your ability to say yes and no is probably one of the most important skills you can develop as a life skill and a business. And one of the ways that we refine and develop that is knowing who we are and what we're trying to do on a day-to-day with our time and our efforts and our energies. So if I'm in a situation where I got to decide, maybe I have 2 good opportunities or a rock and a hard place I have to decide between, the more I know about myself and what I'm aiming to do in life, the easier it is to make that decision. I think there's probably always going to be hard decisions to make when it comes to creating boundaries. And I think some are very healthy to wrestle with as like, I don't know what to do. That's fine. So I think what you want to really aim for is just getting more and more and more clarity about who you are and what you're aiming for. And by extension, I believe that helps with the boundary setting of yes and no. For a lot of us, you have to practice saying no. That's usually the big issue for therapists. So again, preventing this, to be clear with that, is to say no wisely. Protect your schedule, define your client access. What do they get from you? And try to stop over-functioning. So you can't help everyone and you can't be everything to everyone. So do your best with the ones that you are helping. That includes yourself and your family and friends and the time that you have to protect outside of work. So, and you get to decide that work-life balance piece like we talked about earlier. It's on you to decide what that needs to look like. So item 6 is recovery. You could say rest as well, but it's coming off of workload. So that would be your emotional labor without restoration leads to depletion. So this is relevant for us as therapists. It doesn't have to be emotional labor, really any area, mental, physical, spiritual, yes, emotional, anything that is taxing or is a resource that you have, being able to recover from the usage of it. So how do you protect yourself from that? You protect your rest days. You protect your sleep and all the spiritual components of your life, things like exercise, solitude, play, and time away from your phone and your emails and access. Being in a day and age where we're pretty much expected to be available whenever people want, it's important to protect, again, that's a boundary, your ability to say no to access to you. So, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier with rest versus indulgence or overindulgence, is refining rest and recovery comes down to, is this actually helping me recover and restore myself? Or is it just procrastinating and ignoring things and trying to zone out and disconnect and just steal back time that I feel like I lost? Because that doesn't usually feel restorative. And so being very specific with how you recover, I think is really helpful. 7 is alignment. So burnout grows when your work no longer fits your values, calling, family life, or season of life. I talked about this at least in one of the classes, but that for me, I did a pivot with my niche and specialty, which on paper was a bad idea, but there was a disalignment growing that I needed to address. And I steered the alignment towards where it needed to go. And that's great. Did it affect the business? Yeah. I don't think the core values of the business changed at all, but the market that I tend to shifted. And part of that shift was making sure I was aligned fully internally with myself, with everything I'm trying to do, and with what the business is saying it does. And that to me was very important. So you can make shifts over time as you feel alignment shifting, which can sometimes just be maturity and how we start to grow in life. It doesn't mean we're necessarily having dramatic changes. It might just mean we're getting more clear as life goes on about what matters for us. And those things can change. I think a lot of core identity aspects don't really change, but how they're expressed and manifest might, and how we learn to put words to it might. Yeah, and just to read straight from that, prevention, build a practice and vocation that are sustainable, ethical, joyful, and aligned. That's easier said than done. I would definitely start with it's legal, it's ethical, and it's aligned. Sustainable, I think, comes by putting an effort through that, and I think you can sustain your effort towards sustainability by being aligned. Number 8, community. So isolation intensifies burnout. There's a tendency when things get hard and busy that we pull away from community and people. This is a bad idea. Now, is it okay to have levels of isolation in our season? Yeah, I think I phrased that kind of odd. Like a growing season might mean we're not spending as much time with friends and family. That can be okay. And ideally, the people that are close to us know that we're in this season and we have enough of a healthy relationship that it won't hurt it, but it doesn't mean we need to prioritize that time. So if you're married and if you have kids, it means that quality time is going to be more important than quantity of time, which I would say it always is more important as quality, but you don't just get flippant time when you're building a business. You have to have it be quality. If you have friends that are important for you to stay close with, you have to prioritize that. And it might mean a close friend that you normally see weekly, you see every other week, and you might just be cutting in half the amount of time with certain people and spreading it out. But full elimination isn't helpful. For me, that's one day off a week. And the day that I take off is a day that I attend my church. So I see a ton of people I'm close to in a spiritually recharging setting. And there's time in that day other than church to spend time with other friends and family, not connect with that community. So it's a big recharge day for me. And I'm at a place where I don't have to solely rely on that day, but there was a lot of my time that was like the main time was that day. And it was a whole day. And it's doable to take a whole day off while building a business. So how do we prevent this? We seek wise counsel, peer support, mentorship, friendship, in spaces where you're not carrying everything alone. I think that's a big one too, is being able to lean your head on some people's shoulders and be like, this is a hard week. And they're like, yeah, we got you. It's going to be okay. So we tend to carry more weight than we think, generally speaking. That's been my experience, particularly. And we have more people to release some of that too. We can have an exhale oftentimes. And there's been a lot of moments for me where I just needed to talk and just know people listened and cared. And a lot of the time their responses weren't even that deep or even useful. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but like I just needed them to talk and hear me and smile and be like, I'm glad you shared. And, I'm here for you. It's like, thank you. So yeah, I would use this page of the slide as a reference page for checking in with yourself. Like with a lot of slides, I don't think this is like the end all be all necessarily, but I think it's really helpful. So I believe the next slide. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to kind of fly through these next slides because I have an infographic that summarizes them, but I want them here as bigger reference points versus the actual reference page for when you all have these slides. So this is just data on burnout. I tried to pull a lot of recent data. A lot of these are 2023 to 2025. So again, they're topical. A lot of it's on burnout in general, and then there's some prevention. Again, I don't just want to read straight from this. The actual links are provided at the end. So I want to go slow enough that you can pause if you just want to stare at this in the video, especially if you're watching this and you don't have any of the slides. Okay, infographic is large, so I'm going to split it in halves. Yeah. So what are we looking at here with the infographic? All right. I also want this to be pausable to look at. I don't want to dive into every facet of the data. What I want is to just provide words for things that I think a lot of people feel already. Burnout and burnout prevention, and I'll separate those out. Burnout is something that I don't think needs taught to everyone. I think there are people who lean towards not understanding that they're burnt out. And this isn't fully about detection of that on this slide. I have a self-care slide that gets into that a little bit more. But this is just summarizations of research, things to look at, definitions, some stats and numbers of burnout rates. It's common, it's growing. A whole separate presentation can be done on why mental health is getting worse despite it being talked about more. There's a chicken and an egg debate here. It's true with burnout too, is like, well, we have more words for it and we talk about it more. So is it just being recognized more? Therefore, data's up. Or is there something weird about how we talk about it? Like, for instance, one area of research that's interesting is talk therapy can create more problems if all you're doing is ruminating and talking about your problems every single week. Two of the biggest things you can do to help your clients get out of ruts is to make therapy, ironically, less about them at times. And what I mean by that is if they're the center of their whole world, then they're the most important thing and everything's so big to them versus if you volunteer to help other people, if you think about other people, if you think about ways you can help the world, we tend to pull some of that attention off ourselves, put it to the world around us, and we're less focused on me, and more focused on how can I be useful to the world? Not in an overextending way, but in I have skills and talents that I'm good at. And this goes back to the joy and identity piece. And I find joy and a deep sense of meaning when I get to help the world in this way. Doesn't mean depression's not real. Doesn't mean rough days aren't real. Just means sometimes we're a little too focused on ourselves. And so that's a big area that I encourage people to look at, is not to overly ruminate on our problems. And I think I said I have two thoughts to that. I think I kind of mixed them into one. So if a clear distinction comes back to mind, I'll separate it out a little bit more. But point being, the other point was, is it that we're talking about it too much, or is it that it's getting worse just for some other reason? And so when we look at brain, that's a whole nother mental health topic we can go down. But I will say with burnout and prevention. So I have an area here in purple, the role clarity and identity. This is a big one. I gave the example earlier of a practice that I helped with this, but really make that clear. And I would write it down. So we also talked before that you wear multiple hats when you run a business. So you're an owner, you're an entrepreneur, you are the therapist, you're the person delivering the product, you're the salesperson, you're the marketer. Oftentimes you're the bookkeeper. For some of you, you'll be the CPA if you choose to go that route. You're the social media expert. Any area that your business operates in, and you're the one doing that, that is a hat that you get to wear. And it's something that you could outsource if you had the resources. So every role that's different in your company that you are stepping into, write them down and define what their job is. And I would go as far as to say how many hours a week you're expecting of them, or what their goals are. And I said before to have quarterly check-ins with you and all your hats. Hey, are you doing what you're supposed to? Are you stepping into your role right? And maybe, maybe marketer you is like, I don't know if I have all the language I need to fill my role properly to market. And therapist you needs to be more clear about the work that they do. And owner you needs to be more clear about how that should look, and just refining the language. This is what I do, and this is who I am. This is what's expected. And then, of course, identity and vocation as that connects. So you can screenshot this, look at it more if you want. The second half of the page, topic of prevention. Maybe I don't even know if the thing that I'm moving around is showing up on everyone else's screen, but there we go. Okay. So organizational strategies in the top left. So overall, the general consensus that I can give or summarization is businesses that provide access to functionally burnout prevention tools. So mental health services, companies that actually do a good job listening. And there's a joke that goes around all the time about companies that say we're a family here are the ones that are going to treat you worse than anyone else. Companies that want to know you're going to play ball, stuff like that. You have to understand when you're getting into the business of whatever, whether you stay in the mental health industry or not. If you're going to work for someone else, try to be as direct as possible. And I know sometimes people are like, I just need a job. I get that. If you have room to be flexible, or if you're comfortable asking questions, like just be really clear on what's expected and how they handle mental health issues and burnout and work-life balance. Of if I'm expected to work 40 hours a week, what is the expectation for being texted or called outside of those hours when I'm not technically supposed to be working? Just be clear about that. And how they respond to those questions will teach you a lot about how they're going to respond to you. Because if they're kind of like, making you feel a little unsure now before you've even signed on and they've got you, that's probably a really bad sign to come of what's actually going to look like when you're on board. So they're in the middle of some individual strategies. Combined approaches are most effective. So again, like with most things, having systems in place mixed with stepping up and handling problems yourself is a good mix. So I'm responsible for taking care of my health as best I can, eating well, exercising, sleeping well, setting boundaries, doing all these things. And then the systems that I'm choosing to be a part of, professional, religious, even just living situations, neighborhoods to an extent, on all levels, they have a responsibility to take care of me as well. And by extension, maybe me taking care of other people there. So an organizational structure is very important, and an individual philosophy of how to take care of yourself is important. So we have a couple categories of what's evidence-based in terms of burnout prevention. Not going to spend a lot of time diving into them. Workplace system changes is important, making sure your work environment is optimizing around you being healthy, while it's also optimizing around productivity and things it has to. But you have to be a respected part of that system, which leads into leadership and culture. That needs to be refined. Social support and community, I can sing that from the rooftops all day long. Training and supervision as it's necessary, making sure you are equipped. Mindfulness and stress regulation, and rest and recovery practices. We've talked about all that, and not directly mindfulness and stress regulation, but there's pretty good evidence on mindfulness-based interventions. There's some mixed data there. I think the main thing that you need to pay attention to from data I've seen is mindfulness and meditation. If you're doing I want to empty my mind approach, the data I've seen shows that has a higher chance of increasing stress than if you focus on something specific. So I'm not saying the emptying your mind approach increases stress, but I'm saying it's more likely to show an increase in stress than people who focus on something. So an empty mind versus a mind that's like, I'm going to focus on my breathing, my body, a prayer, scripture, phrase, an affirmation, a thing that I want to pay attention to, because it just helps you stay focused. And then that translates to the day-to-day work. And it translates to, I can leave work here and I've practiced mindfulness, and that's a form of stress regulation. Now I can focus on this thing. Work was stressful as I left Friday, but I can shut it off now. Or I had a lot of things get pushed on me in my business that I could spend all weekend working on, but I have this time off. I can come back later. And then bottom left here, some signs that you may be heading towards burnout. I will read those because I want them reaffirmed in your mind. If you're constantly fatigued, if you feel emotionally depleted, it's a big one for therapists. If you feel cynical or you feel detached, irritable or overwhelmed, overall satisfaction in life is down, your ability to focus is harder, you're feeling more ineffective at the work you do, and then perhaps things like increase in aches, headaches, overall physical issues. So, yeah, keep going. Self-care wheel. Okay, This one is pretty good. It's got the copyright, I think, watermark on it. You can print off blank ones. I wanted to use this one. Again, you can take a screenshot if you'd like. This one's from olgaphoenix.com. I have a variation of this that I just have my clients draw. I don't print this out. I show them this one and say, use what you want. But self-care wheel is phenomenal. So this categorically has physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional. I have my clients and myself draw our own because there might be more categories in this. So I let people decide what categories of their health they want to have as full spokes on the wheel. So what does this mean when you're looking at this? So self-care wheel is subdividing your life into areas. So we might say, I feel burnt out and overwhelmed. So the way I'm going to take care of myself is I'm going to eat better. It's like, great. Well, what if you actually become the healthiest eating person on earth and you don't feel that much better, but you actually pay attention to what's lacking in your life? And someone's like, well, what's going on? They're helping you, and they find out, oh, you're sleeping 4 hours a night. It doesn't matter how good you're going to eat. You have to sleep more. You're like, no, but I want to. It's like, no, sleep. You need to sleep. That's your problem. Or someone who is just having a horrible time with their boss at work, and they take care of all these other areas of self-care and they still feel awful. It's because those aren't the problem. Now, what's nice is the professional category here, if professional is your problem, okay, that's going to have the highest return on investment for your time and energy. So investing in professional self-care and managing that is going to have the best effect if you can take care of it. However, making sure your physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and personal are in check and where they need to be will only be helpful overall. They'll just have more negligible positive impact, but not fully negligible, so to speak. So another example is financial. So I actually, on my own self-care wheel and ones that some of my clients will have, we add a financial category. Sometimes people put a sexual category. Sometimes people put a, actually one example is on this sheet right now, the psychological and emotional. Someone might say those are the same things to me. It's like, okay, combine them then. So add however many spokes you want to this. You might be a really creative person and you need creative on here, and that doesn't count as personal for you. It is creative. So that needs to be its own category. You get to decide though. And if you look at the example here in like psychological, this example has self-reflection, therapy journal, or I think those are technical too, therapy and journal, self-awareness, sensory engagement, gardening, practicing asking and receiving help, drawing, okay, simple things. Professional, setting boundaries, not working overtime, actually taking your lunch break, taking your full vacation and sick days, right? So you put on here things that will improve your life if you do them in those categories. So it can be a short list or a long list. Nothing's too irrelevant. Some stuff will just have a higher effect on you than others. And anytime you can have an item hit multiple categories, that is fantastic. Community is another one that I'll put on here. And that's relational health is what I would categorize that as. So for me, an example that I like to use is, it's not a hobby that I have now, but I used to be much more into bouldering, just rock climbing without harnesses, generally indoors. And there's a bouldering gym I went to. It meant physical self-care. I got to move around. I loved it. It was mental, psychological, like it was a puzzle. So sometimes routes that you're climbing, the harder part is figuring out where to put your body. And once you figure that out, your strength is very capable. It's just like, okay, how do I position myself and how do I balance my center of balance to move properly? So it was mental engagement and I could focus on it. And then it was a small gym and I really got to know a lot of people there and the people that worked there. So it hit relational elements for me too. And then that by extension helped me emotionally as well. So going rock climbing, going bouldering was a huge benefit to my overall self-care and sustainable sense of self and mindset because it hit a lot of categories. So if you have tasks that show up or things that you can do that show up in multiple categories, those are like your gold standard ones. So do them a lot because they'll help you a lot. So if you decide to do this, draw your circle. You can pick the 6 categories here. I also threw out relational, financial, sexual was in there, creative, whatever you think. And then just write as many things in there. And whenever you start to feel drained, look at financial, I think, if I didn't say that. Whenever you start to feel drained, look at that circle and ask yourself, which of these pieces of pie, which of these spokes on the wheel is actually taking the hit right now? And you might be like, man, I really could go do yoga or go for a walk, but really I really just need to make my budget. Do the thing that's actually going to be helpful and don't pretend you're helping yourself by doing a bunch of unrelated things. So that's where this is useful. Okay. We talked about this. This is kind of the 5 main things I brought up earlier. We talked about awareness of self. So this is probably going to be a quick summary of a lot of these, which is just get good at checking in with yourself and seeing where you're at. Refined rest, we talked about that, and rest versus indulgence or overindulgence. So refined rest is just knowing what's actually restful. Overindulgence is when certain tasks like scrolling, like a TV show or a video game, clip over into draining and unhelpful. So, you might do well watching one episode of a show a night, but if you get on a binge of it, you feel awful about it. So paying attention to where you eclipse into something not helpful. And sleep's like that too. If you're napping all day, you might be a little depressed. Role clarity, that itself, funny enough, was clear, I believe. So know what you need to do for your job. And role clarity counts in life too as well. So, like in your marriage, with your friends, anything you volunteer for, anything that you do, like know what your role is there. Identity alignment. A man's search for meaning is a big recommendation I give to everyone I can, especially if they haven't read it. I'm like, go either reread it or read it for the first time. It's so good. So I think this is a big one for identity, purpose, meaning, and life fulfillment. Highly recommended. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Okay. As always, you can message me questions and thoughts, either comment section or email. Text is fine too. Okay. And I think the rest is just, So I have a ton of resources. So those are all going to be in the slides. Okay. So now what I would like to do is get around to some of the questions that you all asked me at the start of class that I may or may not have addressed. So I wrote down every question that I would ask. The prompt question was, what's one thing you'd like to either learn, understand by the end of the class, make sure that I talk about? There might be some moments of silence as I'm reading through this. I'm going to read through and check stuff off and double check if I talked about it. I might elaborate and repeat some things. And so what I will do is, if you're listening to this and you brought up a question, and some of you answered with, I'm not really sure, I'm just open to hearing things and I'm curious, you can reach out if this prompted a question. And if I answer your question here, specifically at this time, and there's not a back and forth like there would have been in the classroom, reach out to me and you can say, hey, you didn't quite understand what I was wanting to ask. Maybe I totally missed it and went off in a different direction. Or you can say, okay, but what about this? Or that prompted a new thing. Again, I'm overemphasizing reach out because I love these conversations. So marketing was brought up a lot. And I touch on that as much as I could without going crazy deep into everything. So all of you that asked me about marketing, I'm going to take the position right now that I address to that, while also caveating, we could have done this whole class just on marketing. Like there's always layers and depth for that. So another book recommendation, I don't have it next to me, that you could use for marketing is, I recommended this one already, The $100 Million Offers. He has another book. I believe it's looks super similar, but it's blue and it says $100 million leads. But if you look up Alex Hormozi, you can find his stuff. But his leads book is just about how to get people to know who you are. And it's functionally a marketing book. And I think it does a great job. There's a plethora of things online. It's just picking an avenue and committing. So if you've got something that you're considering doing, you can message me about it. We can have a back and forth on if you think it could be useful. We can talk about it. I can also potentially help with if it would be useful specifically for your type of work, because certain types of marketing approaches are sometimes a little dependent on the clientele you're looking for, and that matters a lot. So get specific with me if you want to talk more marketing. It is probably the most commonly asked question and the hardest for a lot of private practice therapists with low overhead and low amount of money to spend on getting themselves out there and known. So I'm going to skip the rest that asked about marketing, unless it was super specific. Okay. Okay. Getting asked about what hours to work. So do the budget activity that I recommended. Figure out how much money you need to make. Figure out how to set your fee. A typical approach to fee setting is people go online and they look at other people doing the work that they do in their area, and they're like, all right, it costs this much, I'm going to charge a little bit less, and that's how I'm going to be competitive. I would say this, when people say, I want to charge my worth, I think there's a tendency there, which yes, you should, but there's a tendency to think your time is more valuable than it actually is. Now, livable wage is a real thing. What I recommend is charge a low enough number that it's kind of easy to get people in the door, and you can raise prices later. Now, if you really feel like I want to start at this price, go for it. I think whatever your price is, if during a consultation call or face-to-face with someone, you say something like, well, I charge 130, but I do have sliding scale. I know it's a lot. It'd be expensive. You're starting to communicate to them that it's not actually worth that price. If I was at a car dealership and it said like this car costs $20,000, and a salesperson, I asked them like, hey, how much is this car? And like, it's 20,000. They're like, it's a lot of money though. We can probably talk that down a little bit. I wouldn't worry about it. I'm going to either think they're overcharging and they're just going to jump right into reducing the price, or something's off with the salesperson. Either they don't think it's worth that price, or maybe there's something wrong with the car. I'm like, why are we immediately it communicates something's off, that you're immediately jumping into discounts and you're immediately jumping into making sure I understand, we can talk about it. Versus they just come in and say, it's an $18,000 car. Right. So if you can't say this is the price and then be quiet, I think you have potentially a confidence issue with how you're communicating your price, which might mean you need to figure something out internally, or it might genuinely mean you're overcharging. There's no shame in charging low. You can always raise your fees, and you can do it quickly too. Within 3 months, maybe you have a full caseload. Maybe you've done really well and you have a full caseload. You tell all your clients, hey, I'm going to be raising my fee here in about, you can decide how much of a heads up you get. You might say even 30 to, I think more than 2 months is not needed for a fee increase. Heads up, like 8 weeks is fine. And you might raise it by $25 or a certain amount. Or you might, another approach is you keep the price where it is with current clients, and you only raise it for new clients. I definitely wouldn't undervalue yourself. I would say all of you graduating school right now, I think you would all be justified to charge at least 120 or more. If you were talking to me and we were working professionally and you gave me a number less than 120, 125, I would require in that conversation that you justify why you're charging that low, below that number. Because I think you guys have had a good education, and you've put in a lot of work with internship and clinical hours. So, and just from when I graduated in 2020, we've had inflation. The price, there's just so much to consider with pricing. So I know I asked about hours, but my point is get counsel on pricing and don't be afraid to undercharge a little bit and then up the fee. Because you can get waiting lists, and especially if you have a waiting list, that means you're valuable at a higher price. It doesn't mean you have to raise your price. Some philosophies say, well, you have a waiting list, so now up all your prices. You can obviously do that, and that has no ceiling. I don't think you have to take that approach, and you could make ethical arguments against it. But It's okay to not know the answer. It's okay to undercharge a little bit, but you just want to be confident and say, I'm at least worth this much. And I'm happy to communicate that. And I know some people, it might be out of their price range, and that's okay. And then you can decide if you have a sliding scale, how you build that in, how you make that decision. Because sometimes that's how it works. Your price may be a little bit higher, and your full fee clients help subsidize a little bit of your ability to take on lower paying clients. If you're highly, highly interested in lower paying clients that won't pay your bills, you probably need to start looking into nonprofit settings, donations, or ways to subsidize that so you can still make a living and see people at a lower wage. So once you have a budget and know how much you need to make, then you know how much income needs to come in. And then you need to decide how many clients do you want to see per week. And then you divide those numbers out, and that's how much you need to average per session. I recommend that you aim for 20% more than you need. So if you're like, I want to see 20 clients a week at $130. So assuming you'll have a sliding scale and assuming people will cancel, you want to aim for probably 24 bookings in a given week to accommodate that as well as potential cancellations. So, and then I would give a general recommendation of however many clients you want to see a week, probably at least triple that amount of time in other work. So if you want to have clients 20 hours a week, that means you probably want to have close to 24 time slots available. So I would say 48 hours of additional work for the rest of your business while you're building it. You have to use all that? No, I know that's scary numbers, but I'm saying this is a way to overestimate and then probably be doing well, which is easier to do than to underestimate and then constantly try to push this upper threshold. Just start out with more and work your way backwards if you need to. And again, volume. So the more you do, especially if you're doing it wisely, the more you're going to get back. So the less you do up front and early on, just don't expect your business to grow as much. And that can be fine. But if you need it to be successful right away, you're going to be busy. And that's okay. It's part of the process. So what hours to work? Be as strict as you can on your schedule without being oppressive. So schedule your time and commit to it and work hard, not make exceptions. And have trusted people in your life, like a supervisor, maybe coworkers, some friends and family, that can help you make those exceptions. Where you're starting to be like, I'm feeling a little heavy. I'm supposed to do 10 hours of admin work or promotion every Friday. That's how I've set aside, but I'm feeling burnt out. I think I need to take a break. And the people you trust can be like, yeah, you do. Take the break. Then you feel less shame about it. You're like, okay, the people who see me in the mud every day doing this agree that I should pump the brakes a little bit. And that, for me at least, really helps reduce shame, because people who I've brought into this process can encourage me. Then I might bring up other stuff. I'm like, I think I need to do this. And I'm like, you probably just need to sleep a little bit longer. That doesn't sound wise. Go think about it again. And then just getting helpful back and forth. So that's how I would answer that. More marketing. We talked a bit. I was asked about how to detach your worth from the work that you're doing. We talked about that earlier. A way that I would work on assessing that is to pay attention to how you feel when things go well and when they don't. And ask yourself, when they go really well, I don't think you should get in your head. I think you should love and celebrate things going well and not feel like really self-deprecating about that. Just enjoy it, live it up. But when things go poorly, and I'll say this, when things are going well, don't say I'm celebrating because I'm the best in the world. Celebrate because this is cool. And I have a mentality of I want to put in effort, but everything I get's a reward. Not I deserve this for the effort I put in. I deserve to be doing well because I work harder than that person. I deserve to be doing well because I've put in the effort. That's not going to help. Everything's a reward and it's a gift. I may have earned things, like I earn a paycheck at a job if I'm an employee, and but I want to look at it as a gratitude thing. So for me to say, hey, I worked my hardest today and things didn't go well, but I'm happy with who I am and the choices I made. I am not my work. I'm expressed in my work, and I hope that I can pull people into deeper joy with the work that I do. And if it doesn't go well, I want to ask about that. I want to be curious on how I can grow, but I'm not going to accept a condemnation or a shame-based approach or someone telling me I should feel a certain way. I'll listen if it doesn't go well, I'll pay attention to my own shortcomings, even if no one points them out, even if I'm the only one that notices them. And I'll say, I really do need to do a better job of this. But the moment it turns into a story of shame, then it becomes unhelpful. So look at that. More marketing. This one I'll address a little bit again because only one of our classes talked about it. But when you refer out, and I don't want to overly talk the clinical, so I'll say with the business, the more you know what product you deliver, and I'm going to use really businessy language, you as a product, your therapy services, the more you understand your product, the more you'll understand when you're not a good product for someone else. And so there might be things that you invite in, and there might be hiccups. One example is, maybe you're not a grief or trauma therapist, you don't work with that. Well, any client at any time could go through a trauma or a grief experience, and now you have to sit with that. So I would ask the question, are there general things I need to know to do my due diligence as a therapist? And I think, yeah, being trained to a degree in suicidality, in trauma-informed care, in grief, knowing those things because they come up without permission. But you don't have to specialize in divorce. You don't have to specialize in big life transitions for people. You might say, hey, I work just in this avenue. And so work with supervisor, work with peers, know that those decisions are case by case. If you have a standard, that's great. And then real life happens and you're like, oh, I don't know how to navigate this now. Wrestle through that. That's okay. We've talked practicals in a lot of ways. I can go on for probably a couple dozen hours on practicals. It just depends on what we get into. So if there are certain logistical things that as you have listened to this video, the class I was in earlier that I got to speak at, both classes, the previous week's classes, and you're like, there are still things that I feel like I don't understand on the logistics and the practical side, then just email me, because there's always going to be things. It's hard to hit everything. There might be something really unique to your business. And for me to just start spitting off everything that could come up that I am able to talk about, I think would take a couple hours. And so case by case. So just message me. And if it happens in 3 to 6 months from now, message me then. That's totally fine. So yeah. So managing the anxiety of opening a practice. Don't be anxious. Way easier said than done, right? What I really mean by that is it's a leap of faith, and it might be a little scary. There's a lot that could go wrong. This is why the more aligned you can be with who you are, the more okay you can be with it not going well. You don't want it to fail, right? You want it to be successful. But to me, what's more important is that you feel content with who you are. And you're like, this is a big jump, but I don't feel like there's another route to go. Like I could go work another job and be okay. This feels right. And one way to look at that is ask yourself, why is opening up a private practice a better decision than going to work for someone else? And to me, usually the answer is your vision is yours, and you're not finding a place that you can join someone else's vision or mission. It's a lot of work to have a business. So you want it to be something where you're not finding a way to do it anywhere else. And you're like, I am the only one who can do this. And part of that vision might be lifestyle. So you might say, I need to have this flexibility with what could come, and I can't find that now. You just want to be really honest, the pros and cons of opening up a private practice, and then just own that as your answer. Like, this is why I'm doing it. And to remind yourself, this is why, this is why, this is why. And it might not be successful. Businesses fail all the time. Most of them do. I think a better language is they close down. Sometimes it's not failure. Sometimes you'll be 5 years in and realize, I'm going this direction, and close your business. I don't consider that a business failure. I consider that as you've figured something out. So, okay, someone asked a question, and the words I wrote down are who we are. And that's probably my fault. I probably didn't summarize the question right. So if that was you, message me. I'm not going to attempt, so I apologize. I feel like trying to remember, I might have addressed it. Insurance was asked. I am not trained in that. I don't know if it was taught in the other classes, and I have not paneled with insurance. As a private practice clinician, you can populate and write super bills, which are personal submissions that we give to our insurance company from our healthcare provider, hoping that they will reimburse what we already paid to the healthcare provider. So if my client has Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm not going to bill Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm not partnering with their insurance, but I'll bill my client my full rate, send them a super bill, which they can submit to Blue Cross Blue Shield for potential reimbursement. That's hit or miss if it works. I always tell my clients, like, call and make sure it works before just assuming it will. Then insurance paneling, just look into it. Find therapists who are doing it, ask about it. There's mixed experiences with it. So again, it's a business model. It's a way of, it's a money model in some sense. Like, it's a way to make a living, and it comes with pros and cons. So just look into it and see if it makes sense to you. How to grow long-term and stay successful. So every time you grow your business to the next stage, it's healthy to anticipate it being just as hard, difficult, and time-consuming as the initial phase, because you're growing it into something new. So first I would ask is, what does the first full stage look like? And for a lot of people, it's, I have consistent clients on a regular basis that I don't have to work too hard to keep getting. So really what you want to look at is, what's the long-term goal of your business? And if it's just to stay sustainable, then what I would do is figure out a really useful marketing approach that you can turn on and off at any time. Because if you're super successful at marketing, you will run the risk of actually abandoning potential clients and not getting back to them if it's too much of a flow. So find some avenues that you can turn on and off, and then maybe aim for a decent amount of word of mouth coming in where you can create a wait list or refer out. That's where most therapists are aiming for. So when you think about long-term growth and success, that is it. And then if you want to make more money over time, get really good at doing the thing you're doing. And then if you're like, well, I want to get to the point where I have multiple people subletting from my office, that's a big growth phase. I want to open up a group practice now, huge growth phase. I want to start moving into like selling classes or courses, growth phase. So just know that you're expanding the business, and that's going to require effort. About having peace, more peace in your life. Again, it's the identity alignment and connecting with who you are and the work that you're doing. So I could caveat that more and more, but I think we've talked a lot about it. Get aligned with yourself. General question here about what to do post-grad. Conversations with people are helpful, and don't be afraid of making a safe next step and then deciding a couple months in that you want to do something more. There's also no shame for anyone who wants to start in agency just to get your hours done and to learn more about the work before jumping into your long-term goal of private practice. If you plan to retire in this field, you're probably looking at a couple decades. It's totally fine if the first 2 to 5 years are another learning phase where you're just knocking out credentialing and learning from peers. Totally okay to do. Totally okay. Other streams of income. A lot of therapists are into the idea of passive income. Let me make this very clear. That's a new business. For most of you, it's not just going to segue. You're going to have to work your butt off to build up social media, to build up online courses, CEU program. So what you'll want to do is think about what you're doing really well and how you can expand that. I do think this book, which you guys have, is your highly recommended, the Building Your Ideal Private Practice. She gets into it as well, but I would not look at that anytime soon. Would be my recommendation. Get really good at your therapy business before expanding it. This is such a big pitfall, one that I know very well and still have constant temptation towards. A lot of businesses are struggling because they're trying to do too many things. So get really good at something first, and then start, if you're wanting more out of that experience and other streams of income, start then being curious. Where's the natural next step for my professional expression? This is a constant question and very tempting to do early. So, we talked about work-life balance, handling down months. Yes, good question. So down months happen. Track trends year to year. So your first 2 years, probably, it's gonna be really hard to see trends. But just know, like the holiday season, you can expect a dip. Memorial Day weekend, which we just had, people might be out of town. There's gonna be certain trends. So pay attention to calendars, socio-political, socioeconomic things. Every time there's a presidential election, think about how your clientele will be affected. You can pay attention to who you see and make predictions about what months or weeks are going to be easier or harder. You can actually do that pretty reliably when you have a focused demographic and when you know your clients well. So how do you prepare for them? If you're making enough money, you can just eat it and not worry about it. I recommend people have set aside a certain amount of their income for vacation and down days, sick days, and over time track low months and see what they look like. You can have a rainy day fund as well. There's a lot of budgeting approaches to handling down months. The way that I look at it is if I'm really full, great. And if I'm really low on people, great. Why? Because when I'm in a season of getting flooded in, and I believe in this, if you're in a harvest season, so to speak, reap what you've sown, work more than you would normally do. You don't have to keep a perfect 40-hour balance. You might be like, there's a lot, like my referrals are finally picking up and it's a lot of work. Then work a lot. And if you have a down month, or even a week, sometimes I have down weeks and I randomly get like a 3-hour time block at the start or end of my week where clients canceled. I might just have a date with my wife instead or spend time with other people. I'm like, hey, I'm making a little bit less money than I expected this week or this month. And that has freed me up to just rest a little bit. And I'm not worried about next month. If I'm seeing a trend month to month of things going down, then that downtime needs to be reinvesting back into the company big time. If it's a constant decline, that's a good signal of like, oh shoot, something's happening, ramp it back up. If it's just a random down week or down month and there's no trend happening, I just roll with it. I'm like, I get to rest more. This is great. So just pay attention to it and learn to roll with it. Additional work like court work. So yeah, I would decide, if you want to work in schools or work in the court system, specialization is helpful. There's high need in the court system. Again, talk to other people about what this looks like. Talk to other people. It's hard to predict exactly what it'll look like, but my recommendation is anything outside of just the face-to-face therapy room, you probably really want to have a passion for what that work will provide. So, telehealth companies, there's a lot of flack that BetterHelp gets, and I think rightfully so. So looking at companies that hire you for telehealth, vet them like crazy. I think BetterHelp's had issues with selling data and sometimes reliability, or they integrate texting, and they just really sometimes straddle a line of unethical and borderline legal issues. So just vet them heavily and be wise about that. And again, like always, if you can find people who are already doing that work, this is where you can go onto forums like Reddit and other places and just ask about it, see what people's experiences are like. And then when you're reaching out to these companies, be really bold and blunt with your questions. Be really clear. So I think that helps. We talked about social media as a marketing tool. Yeah, you really got to go all in. And then the strategy you take is dependent on what you want. So if you're just trying to grow base, you need to probably do a lot of high volume, high quality. This is another one that I could talk for probably an hour plus on. So I'd say if you're really considering moving into social media, reach out separately, because I've done it very passively. But if this is like, I want to do this, I have really close friends of mine who have been really successful in different areas of social media. And I just don't want to do that level of work to get there. So I'd be more than happy to share what they have done to do that, what seems to be consistently true, if you want to make a huge push in that direction. But worst case scenario, I think it can be a good way just to stay on top of your own, like I'm going to put social media tips on mental health and just extra resources for my clients, and it helps keep me accountable to study and reflect. That's a great way to use it. So building professional identity, we've talked about that excessively. Reasonable expectations, I think we've also talked about excessively, and the big one there is that it just will be hard. The language that I like to use about life is that life is often simpler than we expect, but more difficult than we expect. What I mean by that is usually the route forward is simple. I think a lot of business is very simple. you work a lot in the right areas over and over. And I think we have the reference tools like these, good books, good places to go. People can give you advice. I could sit down with all of you and give you a checklist. And the question would be, will you do that? And I think I told this to one of the classes. No, most of the time you just won't do the checklist. And I'm talking to you, everyone, myself included, because there's so many things we can do. Any hobby you get into, any interest you have, a mentor can say, hey, you just do this every single day for 5 years and you'll be good. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that actually. Yeah, so it's not that we are incapable, it's that we don't want to put in the work required for the thing. And a big temptation away from that is spreading yourself too thin. So I also love the saying, you can do anything you want, but not everything you want. So focus on one thing to do well and implement the steps daily towards doing that thing. Then you'll be pretty good overall. And you have to refine elements of that, obviously. So practices with other professionals. Yep. So you're a business owner and a clinician. So the business side, you can run a business that allows, yourself in there, other disciplines within the mental health field, like social workers and counselors. You could also have, you could run one that has a yoga studio in it too, or a chiropractic office. You can do all that. You just have to look more into what rules do they have. And they're accountable to their own. If they're in 1099-C, they're their own business owner, you're just renting them space, or if you're hiring them on, you have to do your research on what the requirements are for them as employees, which is a lot on you. Or if they are contractors, they have to figure all that out themselves, and you want to be really involved in understanding that as best you can. I would probably not jump into multiple disciplines all at once. I would start as adjacent to you and slowly start growing. But it's definitely a viable option. A lot of people have that as a dream and then don't do it. I think it takes some effort, but it's doable. Okay, so final thing, I got asked about my overall journey and my regrets that I had, and maybe things to do early. I talked about these things sporadically between both classes, so I'm going to try to say things I didn't say, which might mean I repeat them, and it might mean I miss them. I have pretty much no regrets from how I started. My number one goal when I got out was to pay off all my student loan debts and to have as low expenses as possible. So I spent money on pretty much nothing except paying off student loans, and I worked really hard, and I set a threshold. I said, this is what burnout looks like for me. And I said, I'm going to push myself until it gets close, and then I'm going to start pulling back. And that's what I did. And then right when that happened, that was 18 months-ish. My goal was debt gone in 18 months. I had debt gone in 18 months and 2 weeks, and then met my wife 2 weeks after that. And so I actually then spent a transition period of like, business is successful. I worked a lot less as I just got to know my wife and got engaged and got married. And the thing that I would say that is my biggest regret, and I kind of talked about this already, is primarily, I don't even say this is regret. I started getting my hands into too many different avenues within the business world. So currently, I'm a clinician. I own and operate a suite in a building. So I have 3 offices that I have in there that I can rent out to therapists. I supervise postgrads. I do professional engagement like this, where I have trainings that I run and a weekly training program that I do. And then I also offer general professional coaching and life coaching. And so what happened is these started to expand out of what I was already doing, but then I made a shift in my overall specialty and niche. And the other areas weren't as refined yet as they needed to be for me to do that smoothly. So it's put a lot of pressure on me where, if I'm being totally honest, 100% of me could not attend to all of them the way they needed to. So I've had to do a little bit of pulling back and reassessing some things. The last 2 years had some big shifts in that area. So when I say regret or disappointment, not really. It's just a lot of big pivots at once, simultaneously, with a lot of shifts in personal life work that I do, volunteer work and family life. So I think regret's too aggressive, but it is something that I probably needed to find a way to move a little bit slower, but I was also hitting a couple areas in life that needed a change now. And so during that period, I also got better at integrating the important people into my life to also give opinions on my business and advice. So actually, I would say a lot of the, what would I do different or what to focus on early on is stuff that I've integrated into what we talked about in class and in this video. If I get a chance to hang out with any of you all in person at any point, at any event, or if we grab coffee or something like that, or if you stop by the office, I'm happy to just dive into the curiosity one-on-one and the specifics of that, because I could give a very long version of my story. But the main thing to know is I really believe what I have spoken about today and in class, of the more aligned you can get with who you are, the better. Now, the biggest risk I made so far in my business was transitioning from being under someone else's umbrella of a practice to my own location with a suite. It tripled my overall expenses, and it was the highest risk moment. And it was at that point, which was last year, to do that big shift. It was the least amount of stress I had felt in 2 years, despite the highest risk on the table ever in my professional career. It's because it was super aligned with what I needed to do next. And it felt great despite real risk. So that is that. Again, I'm a broken record. Reach out if you have more questions. This has been a lot of fun. This video is out and you should have a couple documents as well. So it was great to work with you all, and I hope to be bumping into all of you in the professional world in the months to come. See ya.